going to go into a little bit about the Bitcoin transactions and what it actually looks like, what it actually involves. Let's see. So, all right. So as Chris had talked before, there are some vital components in Bitcoin transactions for owning Bitcoin, and those are these four things: your private key, your public key hash, which is commonly known as Bitcoin address. If any of you have Bitcoin or have sent Bitcoin to someone, the screenshot of the QR code that you take is usually the Bitcoin address. And the digital signature, which Chris has already talked about. But I'll go into that a little bit more. Okay, so let's talk about private key first. So this is it. If you lose this, all your funds are gone, your money's lost, bye-bye. And that's why you should never show your private key to anybody, not even your family probably. Alright, so private key is a random number, and he said it's a huge, huge number, and here's the figure. The number is between 0 and 1.1 times 10 power 77, and that is actually close to the total number of atoms in the known universe. Alright, so here's an example of a private key. This doesn't really look like a large number, right? It fits on the screen, but this is actually a converted version of some number, and that actually has 256 characters. Here we have 1 to 0 to 5. We actually have 64. And this format we call a hexadecimal digit, where each character represents 4 bits of information. So 64 times 4 is 256. Alright, public key, the next component. So public key is actually a derivation of private key, and that is done this way. We take a private key, which you don't show to anyone. This is like your PIN code to your card, and we push it, and we put it through something called elliptic curve multiplication, and this is a mathematical function that somehow changes whatever goes into something else when it comes out. Let's put it in, and it comes out the public key. And the point here, the very important point here, why we're doing all this, is that trying to find out private key through public key is irreversible. You cannot do that. So you can actually, there's a reason this is called the public keys, because you can show it to the public and there will be no problem. They will not figure out your private key through this. Let's move on to public key hash, which is also known as Bitcoin address. So this is derived from, not public key, which is derived from private key. It works like this. There's another function, it's different from the previous mathematical elliptic curve function. And I believe, yeah, so those who already know what hashing function is and kind of heard of the term SHA-256, or I don't know how do you read this, right? MD16, right? Awesome. So those two hashes are combined to find out. You can't find out public key from public key hash. Alright, let's move on to the last vital component of transaction, digital signature. Digital signature is made by combining private key and transaction data somehow, and that produces your digital signature. And the function that digital signature has, or SIGS, digital signature is so long, is this. It is used to protect the private key, your PIN code, from being exposed to this Bitcoin system whenever you want to, say, send something to another person, send your Bitcoin to another person. You'll have to put in your PIN code to show that, to authenticate that you're the owner. And you don't put in your private key, because if you do that, the Bitcoin system will know and everyone will have access to your private key. So that's why we need a digital signature, because this can prove your ownership without actually showing everyone your private key. And the second reason is that when you create a digital signature, I wrote it here, a transaction data goes in. That's like who is sending this money, who's receiving it, how much is being transacted. And if you group that with private key when you're creating a digital signature, it prevents the transaction from being altered in the middle. Because let's say somebody sends another person, Alice sends Bob 5 Bitcoin, but somebody changes that to 10 Bitcoin, transaction data has been altered here. But because digital signature exists, when that data has been altered, it is no longer valid, so it would not go through. Alright, so here is a map of all the things that I explained just now. A simplified version. So 3 stars, very, very important. Do not lose this. And Public key is derived from private key, and public key hash is derived from public key. And here, digital signature is derived from both private key and transaction data. I wish I could like put that somewhere up here so you can see this all the time. All right. Now, let's go into the transactions itself. So there are different types of transactions when it comes to Bitcoin. Let's see. Yeah, these are the 5. Pay to public key hash or Bitcoin address. There's something called multi-signature, which is like a joint account. And pay to script hash, time lock, and hash lock. Let's go into what each of these mean. So the first one, pay to public key hash. So here's the premise. Someone sent you some Bitcoin using the P2PKH or pay to public key hash method. And now you want to spend it. How can you do this? What is it actually done? So I'm going to compare this to when you go to an ATM or try to transfer money through your mobile app. So I'm not sure which one you're more familiar with because these days I don't think a lot of people actually use the ATM. So I put both. Both will work. So first, if you want to send somebody some money, Bitcoin or fiat money, whatever, Korean won or dollars, you first need the receiver's account number, something that says that this is tied to the receiver. In an ATM or the old financial system, you have the account number. But in Bitcoin transfer, in this method, you'll have the public key hash. That's equivalent to account number. And then here's the important part. So when you go on your phone and try to do a mobile online banking transfer, you have to type in your PIN code, right? Why is that needed? It's because the app needs to know whether you actually own these funds. The same thing happens in Bitcoin transfer, but the PIN code, the number, is actually here transferred into public key and your digital signature. Both your public key, the sender's public key, and the digital signature. And these are equivalent to a PIN in an ATM. All right, and the rest is just the same. You put the receiver's account number or the receiver's address, and then you put in the amount, and it is sent. So here's a demonstration. We have Alice, Bob, and Carol, and now Alice wants to send Bitcoin to Bob. Bob gives her his public key hash, which is the address to which Alice will now send the money. Now Alice has Bob's pub key hash, and what he does, she sends two Bitcoins, but she puts a condition, and the condition is for the person who receives it. Here's the condition that Alice puts. The condition for spending the 2 Bitcoin that she is sending right now is that whoever wants to spend this money has to provide Bob's public key and Bob's signature. So if Bob loses his private key and does not have his pub key and signature, even he cannot use these 2 Bitcoins. So this is the condition that Alice sets on her 2 Bitcoins. And now it goes to Bob. Now Bitcoin has been successfully sent using the pay to pub key hash method. And now Bob wants to send the 2 Bitcoins to Carol. What does she do? She gives him her public key hash, which is an account number or an address. And then now Bob has the pub key, Carol's pub key. What he does is he puts in, it's a little different now, he puts in his pub key and signature to prove his ownership of the 2 Bitcoin that he received from Alice. And what this does is that it erases the condition to spend this 2 Bitcoin and this is a change of ownership. Now he puts a different condition. The condition for spending the 2 Bitcoin now is to provide Carol's public key and signature. Carol's public key and signature is nothing but the PIN code. And this is sent to Carol, and Carol receives it. Now that has been a successful transaction. All right, so here comes the concept of locking script and unlocking script. Yeah? Oh, sorry.
So say that Carol lost her private key.
Mm-hmm.
Then does Bob, he still control the Bitcoin?
Nobody has control of Bitcoin. Right. Whoever somehow figures out Carol's public key and signature or her private key, only that person can actually spend it. It's lost forever.
Bob can't.
Yeah, not even Bob. Yeah.
And
Good
what's
question.
What's the reason that they put conditions for transactions?
So I'm not sure. I myself am not sure, like to a very good degree about why that is. But maybe if we compare it to, maybe if you remember, this is an electronic transaction, unlike physical transactions. In a physical transaction, I have like $50 and I want to send it to somebody across the country. I can actually still do that by sending a mail, and that has to travel all the way there. But in the electronic transaction, nothing like that happens. Everything's digital, and on the digital world, what happens is just the change of ownership of that money specified, and that's where the condition comes in. That this is how you change the ownership of certain money. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wonder like how complicated that condition work.
Oh, we'll go into that.
Okay.
Don't worry. Okay, so going into locking script and unlocking script. Locking script here is nothing but that condition you saw in the quotation bubble. It's the condition that the sender sets for whoever sets, so that, what is that, how do I phrase this? I'll just read it out. Sets the condition for spending the Bitcoin after it's been received by someone. And the unlocking script, literally unlocking, means that what has to be provided in order to, what is the data that satisfies those conditions that you have to provide in order to use that money. Alright, so here is an example. So in pay to public key hash method, which we just saw about Alice Carroll, the locking script contains the public key hash, and the unlocking script contains the wannabe spender's pub key and sig. This means nothing but, so this condition in the programming language will contain, what is that? No, not that, sorry. Oh yeah, actually yeah. So this is the locking script, the condition. This will contain Carol's public key hash. Here it is. This will be in here. And in unlocking script, that'll have the spenders, wannabe spenders, pub key and sig. So Carol has this money now. If she wants to spend this money, she'll have to provide her pub key and signature. These two things will go into the unlocking script. Alright, let's take a closer look. So I just wrote the same example here. And alright, so Alice wires Bitcoin to Bob's pub key hash. I just used the term wire because that's what happens in wire transfers. I think it's the same concept. Here's the locking script. So forget about, I don't know how familiar you all are with programming language. I'm not, so I'm not going to go into that. So forget about these ops and ops. Just look at this. Bob pub key hash. So the locking script here, this is the condition that Alice sets for the money that she's sending to Bob. And what has to be set, this is what has to be satisfied in order to actually spend this money that she has just sent. And now, when the locking script contains somebody's public key hash, the unlocking script, or what has to be provided in order to you claim ownership to that fund, is the signature and the public key. Alright, let's see. I think I have an example for this. Not yet. Does anybody have any questions?
So if you wanted to use a different cryptographic protocol, like for the locking script, could you do that?
If you want to use a different protocol.
Like let's say that somehow quantum computers become mainstream and they're a real risk. Like, would you be able to swap out something in the locking script, use something instead of SHA-256?
I'm not
Hashing
sure.
is quantum safe, so you're safe.
Right?
Okay.
Kevin, can you say that again?
Hashing is quantum safe, so you're safe.
Oh, right. Okay. But maybe your question can also be reworded to say, can we actually change the locking script?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? There are, to what degree?
Like, well, I thought with quantum computers, you have a public key, you can derive the private key from it if they're powerful enough to use it.
Yes.
Then if you wanted to like use a different algorithm, like
Maybe we can get into this later.
Yeah.
okay.
Why don't we do that afterwards? Alright, so, does anybody else want to clarify this?
There's like a limited amount of scripts, so you can only use ones that are available, and you have to like soft fork to add more.
Okay. I didn't actually hear what you said very well, but I trying to.
We can talk about it.
Yeah, okay. But this, we'll come back to this later. You'll see a lot of locking script in the rest of the presentation. Maybe that'll give you some more familiarity. All right, let's move on to multi-signature. This is very similar to having a joint account, to which many people have claimed to the ownership of that account. And here in Bitcoin, we call this usually M of N multisig. M represents the number of people who, N represents the number of people who are in the account, and M is a number of approvals that you need to get in order to actually spend money from this account. So I'll give an example of a two of three multisig payment. That means at least 2 of the 3 people who hold the account need to agree upon that transaction, spending of the money from that account, which means they have to provide their signatures. At least 2 out of 3 people have to provide their signatures to any spending. Here's the locking script again, and what's important here is that, so this is the address, or like the recipient's address, and unlike the previous method, pay to public key hash, this is not the public key hash. The address is not public key hash. Here in the brackets, it was public key hash. Here it's just public key. And that means if somebody sends Bitcoin to an address like this, a multi-signature address, they'll have the unlocking script. The condition that has to be met is 2 signatures of any combination. So the first, second person, or the first, third person, or the second and third person. All right. Here's another one. So pay to script hash is another way of sending your money and another way to receive it and prove your ownership. Let's see. So I took an example from, okay, this is spelled very wrong. This is supposed to be A. Antonopoulos. He wrote a book called Mastering Bitcoin, and this is an example that I took from that book. So let's say that there is a multi-signature account, which we just talked about, which is 2 of 5. That means at least 2 signatures have to be provided out of 5 in order for any transaction to occur. Now the question is, someone wants to send Bitcoin to this multi-signature account. What does the sender put in as the account number? That was the previous locking script, or the address, and the next one looks pretty similar. It is, so two signatures out of pub key 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, out of 5. So 2 of 5, all these pub keys are labeled, and check multi-sig. But this is too long. I'll show you why. That is the version. This is up here. That is pretty long, and when you have a lot of people in the multi-signature account, you still will have longer stuff. So you wouldn't want that because your data size is too big. Alright, so first public key, second public key, and 3, 4, 5 public keys. So what happens here is that you want to make this data shorter. So you put it through a hashing function, and what comes out is much shorter. And the same concept applies here. You can't figure that out. You can't figure this out from just looking at what came out of the hashing function. So here's why that's useful. This is the copy of whatever the locking script. This becomes that. It's pretty short. And this is the address that you're going to use. So here's the script, locking script and unlocking script before we put it through the hashing function. Now, after we've put this through the hashing function, this is what comes. That's what goes in here. So I take the same exact script and just label it differently, calling it the redeem script. And then when I put the redeem script through the hashing function, I'll get the 20-byte hash of redeem script, and see, it's hash. And then I put some other operations inside. And the unlocking script, the condition that has to be met, what I have to provide to prove my ownership of the fund is 2 signatures out of 5, any 2 combination, and then this original script that went inside the hashing function. And why that is? Do you want to know why that is? Okay, I'll do it shortly. So do you think anybody can find out what this redeem script looks like when they see the hashed version? No, right? So only the person, if this original script is being set as a condition to prove your ownership, literally only you can provide that. And that's why that works. Kind of make sense? Okay. Alright, so here's a summary, quickly. So Alice sends Bitcoin to an public pay to public key hash to Bob's public key hash. This is nothing but the address or the account number in an ATM. So Bob's in P2PKH, pay to public key hash, Alice sends the money to Bob's public key hash in multi-signature to n number of public keys combined, and pay to script hash, you send the money to the hashed version of the original locking script. Did you have a question? No, okay. Okay, and the pin needed to spend the Bitcoin that was sent is in pay to public key hash method, Bob's public key and signature. And here in multi-signature is just m number of signatures. And in the pay to script hash, you need the same thing here. You need n number of signatures, whatever is specified by the script, plus the original script that went into the hashing function. Alright, so let's actually see the visualization of a transaction. Here's an example. Alice has wired Bitcoin to Bob's public key hash, one type of transaction. And now Bob wants to spend it. So this is the lock that Alice put on this money locking script. And now Bob has to provide his signature and public key to unlock this account to be able to spend it. And here are just some keys for the words. So office operation, duplicate the data, hash the data. Alright, so I put this here. What is highlighted right now is the unlocking script, which Bob has to provide in order to spend the money. So he has provided that, let's say. He put his signature and public key. And now what the operation does, this locking script is, it says duplicate whatever is on the top of the stack right now. So it took Bob's public key hash and duplicated it and put it on top of the stack. Now the next operation says hash it. So hash whatever is on the top right now, hash it, and you get Bob's public key hash. And then the operation says put in Bob's public key hash that Bob has provided to Alice, so it puts that on top of the top stack, and the next operator says, okay, now check if those two public key hashes are equal. So if they're equal, they will be removed. And if they're not equal, that means that the public key hash that Bob provided to Alice as his address does not match what he provided as his public key. Because public key hash is nothing but public key hashed. And if you put in a different public key, it'll give a different public key hash. So this operation right now is to just check if Bob actually provided the right public key. Alright, and the next thing, it just checks for if Bob's signature matches against the public key. And then voila, if it goes through, then the authentication is valid and he can now spend the money. Alright. Time lock, very simple idea. I myself don't understand the details about this, but what I've figured out is that there are two types of time lock, and literally by time it means time needs to be spent before, some time is required before you can actually spend the money. But it's not actually time, it's block height, how many blocks actually get inside the block, gets counted in the blockchain. So the first category is a lock that can restrict the spending of the Bitcoin after the transaction has been sent into the blockchain. So let's say block has to, reach the height of, what an example. 7 blocks has to be created before you can actually spend this Bitcoin. Or the second version is the block height. You can set the block height that that is needed to spend this before putting this into the blockchain, this transaction into the blockchain. You can ask questions about this later to another person, because I myself don't understand a lot about it. Here's a last type of transaction. So hash lock is a pretty simple idea. So if I want to send Bitcoin to somebody else, I create data that I don't share with anyone. I'll call that a secret data. And I hash that data, and then I just send this hashed data to whoever No, I don't want to send the receiver. Sorry, I want to send Bitcoin to someone, and the receiver creates a secret data that I don't know about, hashes that, and sends it to me. And then that's the Bitcoin the address that I'm going to send the money to. So I send the money to whatever secret data has been hashed, and the receiver has to provide the original secret data in order to claim that money, because only the original secret data, when hashed, will give the same result as the secret data hash that I address the Bitcoin to. So that's it. Thank you.